Hello, my fellow Alaskans. Welcome to another beautiful day here in the state of Alaska. I hope where you are it is just as sunny as it is here where I am. I hope you got your popcorn popped and ready to go. Your shot glasses ready to be filled for the lies we are about to ready to hear, the reasons that they will not do something they're supposed to do. The House has decided to finally grace all Alaskans with their presence onto the House floor. Here in just a little bit, we are going to be watching the House sit down and finally debate the budget and what is going to happen there. Clearly, this is going to be one hell of a battle going on. The greed and entitlement in Juneau is astounding. Us Alaskans just can't fathom it. Get ready, folks. The crap show is about ready to begin. Good old Louise Stutes has just taken her seat, and I'm sure that gavel is about ready to swing high and wide as they get the old crap show, clown show going on there in Juneau started. Everybody has heard that we got places like Alaska AFL, CIO, Rasmussen Foundation, Bert Stedman, you name it. I could keep going down the list that have been sitting there in Juneau lobbying them to remove all of the stimulus rebate check and our statutory PFD. They think all the pork spending going on to the budget should only happen in their direction, and the rest of us Alaskans should just pay for it and hand over our permanent fund dividends to them. Now, mind you, never forget that the budget currently has in it a $1,300 energy rebate check. That is the only money that Alaskans, all Alaskans, are going to see of that $4.5 billion surplus in tax revenue they got this year. That was above and beyond what the governor's original proposed budget, what that was sent to them. They want to strip that out. They are strong-arming the governor, telling him to veto that out of the budget, and you'll guaranteed have our yes vote on the floor. Well, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens down there in Juneau and what direction they plan on taking things next. Are you as ready as I am? Take a moment right now, please like and share this video. We want to be able to have as many Alaskans as possible watching this happening down there, listening to the excuses, the corruption, the lies, the myths that they can't pay for something that they dang well have the money to do. In fact, they could pay this entire budget as is and all 6 years of our stolen PFDs back and still have a record-breaking $13 billion sitting there above and beyond what they need to be able to spend on this current budget in time and all of the years stolen from us paid back. They don't want you to know this stuff. Mainstream media, those politicians sitting inside that room don't want you to know that that is all possible. They want to think it will bankrupt our state if they were to actually follow the laws. One of the reasons why the extreme radical left, our unions, our NEA organizations, you name it, that's the reason why they don't want this PFD paid out this year as a statutory one, because they know that if they do it this year, it's going to be even harder for them to justify doing it again next year, because they are proven once and for all, something that all of us that have been fighting this very long battle have known, that they could have paid us our statutory PFDs since day one. Nowhere would it ever have caused our state to go bankrupt. Nowhere would it have caused our students not to have their double to triple the costs anywhere else in the nation's education, for the worst in the nation anywhere else. It is amazing the trickery and lies and misrepresentation that is going on from those there. Bert Stedman, Natasha von Imhoff, Lyman, Hoffman, you name it, those that sit inside of the Senate have been going around door to door, knocking on each one of these House member door, insisting that the budget that they passed over to them not get concurred, giving them every excuse and every reason in the book why they should not follow the law. Will they listen to the corrupt legislators down there? Will people like Representative Kelly Merrick and Zach Fields, who are bought and paid for by the unions, convince them that the unions are the only ones that deserve our money? Even Alaska AFL has put out on their own website and on Facebook that they themselves think they are the only ones entitled to our money, that Alaskans should never get 1 red cent of it, not 1 penny, even though by law that money legally belongs to each and every one of us, not them. The last time we got to vote on actually whether or not they could spend our money on the PFD back in, I believe it was 1999, when Sarah Palin was in office, they were looking at trying to spend the ERA back then, except for the difference was they allowed Alaskans to vote on it. We had 86% of Alaskans told them hell no when we were given a chance to voice our opinion. This is why they will never bring it to the floor for a vote to allow us Alaskans to have our own voices finally heard at the ballot box, what we think. They know what we think. We know that they are a bunch of lying thieves down there in Juneau that are more worried about keeping the school districts and the unions triple to anywhere else in the nation's funding to them flowing in. So what can you do to help prevent this from happening? What you have been doing for the last few days, constantly, consistently, being on the telephone, contacting your legislators in the Senate and the House, telling them what you think about their very corrupt budgets. You hear the arguments from people out there. I saw it on a Holland video earlier today, Senator Roger Holland's video. This guy came up and he was saying, oh, well, education's important. We got to pay for education. We shouldn't be giving out PFDs to Alaskans. It's going to destroy our education. There won't be nothing left there for next year. That $3.6 billion that they're putting out the door this year for the stimulus check and PFDs would have been better spent giving it to the Department of Education of Alaska. You know, the $3.5 billion that they're already receiving in this year's budget that could fund them for the next 3 years. But, you know, he wants to say that our PFDs should also be stolen to give them an additional 3 years worth of funding this year. It just shows you how stupid people really are. There goes the gavel on the floor. Let's listen in and see what's going on.
Will the House please come to order? Will members please indicate their presence by voting? Will the clerk please tally the board?
38 members present.
With 38 members present, we have a quorum to conduct business. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May the journal reflect that there are no excused absences today.
Leading the invocation today is Representative Josephson. Will members please rise?
Good morning. Happy weekend to you all. With the greatest respect for the beliefs of all Alaskans, I offer the following thoughts, which are the words of a single great American of the modern American era. On ideals. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current that can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. On violence. For there is another kind of violence, slower but just as deadly as the shot or the bombing in the night. This is the violence of institutions, indifference and inaction and slow decay. This is the violence that afflicts the poor, that poisons relations between men because their skin has different colors. This is a slow destruction of child by hunger, and schools without books, and homes without heat in the winter. On the subject of others, what reason do we have really for our existence as human beings unless we've made some other contribution to somebody else to improve their own lives? On dissent, it is not enough to allow dissent. We must demand it, for there is much to dissent from. On youth, the world demands the qualities of youth, not a time of life, but a state of mind, a temper of the will, a quality of the imagination, a predominance of courage over timidity, an appetite for adventure over the life of ease. On speech, all great questions must be raised by great voices. And the greatest voice is the voice of the people, speaking out in prose, or painting, or poetry, or music, speaking out in homes and halls, streets and farms, courts and cafes. Let that voice speak, and the stillness you hear will be the gratitude of mankind. And two more selections. On human equality, we must recognize the full human equality of our people before God, before the law, and in the councils of government. We must do this not because it is economically advantageous, although it is, not because the laws of God command it, although they do, not because people in other lands wish it so. We must do it for the single and fundamental reason that it is the right thing to do. And finally, on moral courage. Few are willing to brave the disapproval of their fellows, the censure of their colleagues, the wrath of their society. Moral courage is a rarer commodity than bravery in battle or great intelligence. Yet it is the one essential vital quality for those who seek to change a world which yields most painfully to change. And I say, Amen.
Amen. Representative McKay, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Representative Thompson.
Madam Chair, I move and ask unanimous consent that prayer be spread across today's journal.
Hearing no objection, the prayer will be spread across the journal. Will the clerk please certify the journal for the previous legislative days?
I certify as to the correctness of the journal for the 114th through the 116th legislative days.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move and ask unanimous consent that the journal of the previous days be approved and certified by the Chief Clerk.
Hearing no objection, the journal stands approved. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move and ask unanimous consent that the members go into the limbo file to take up House Bill 281. The member from District 39 will explain the changes made by the other body.
Representative Foster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On everyone's desks, we've got quite a few papers on our desk, but on your desks should be two handouts. One says the examples of common items in HB 281, and then there should be a second that shows the differences. However, I am not seeing that on my desk here, so if we could take just a very brief at ease.
Briefity.
We are barely seconds into this, and they're already taking their very first at ease. They gotta make sure to definitely highlight the differences between what the House bill was and what the Senate bill was for this particular budget for all items. Now, mind you, they only passed HB 281 and 282 out of the Senate. It did not include any capital budget money that was there, nor did it include anything to do with what you would classify as a statutory PFD. In fact, it was barely 25% of what our permanent fund dividend was supposed to be. It was only a $1,250 check that they wanted to give us for our PFD, nowhere close to the statutory laws that we have. So what will be presented here today, it's going to be really, really fun to listen to. The opening invocation that was given there was definitely highly slanted towards trying to charge the room up and make it appear that he was trying to appeal to all Alaskans, when in reality that invocation was more towards catering to the special interests and virtue signaling to them that that legislator cared more about those people than he does for the majority of all Alaskans. 730,000 of us are currently counting on them to pass this budget. 630,000 of us are expecting to see it for the first time in 7 years, our statutory PFD being paid, on top of an energy rebate check that is desperately in dire need of getting. It'll barely cover the extra cost in my fuel oil compared to what it cost me last year at this same time to fill up my tank. That money could I desperately need it. That doesn't include the gasoline cost that just last year alone was $6,000 more than I had ever spent the year prior to that. And I'm expecting to spend $12,000 more this year than I did last year to cover my expenses, thanks to the Biden economy that we are currently all suffering through. So where are the stand? What's going to happen next? Nobody knows. If we go by all the rumor mills out there, lots of backroom boiler deals were being made. Arm twisting, blackmail, coercion, thinly veiled threats, so to speak. And I wish I could say they were thinly veiled threats. They were just threats being made. You do as we tell you, or you're going to pay the consequences. And that's exactly what's going to happen. So who's going to pay the consequences? We've got a budget that is 10 times larger than it ever needed to be, and that's not including our PFDs or stimulus check. They have spent so much pork in this budget, it makes the pigs unhappy because their trough is empty because they stole it all from them. So what will this turn into today? You can already see we're just barely minutes into this, and they're already delaying and tactics going on. For some reason, Foster there doesn't have what he's supposed to have in front of him to give the comparable differences between the House's budget and the Senate budget that they are currently about to review. Will they concur? Will they do the right thing for the first time in 7 years? Will they actually send a signal out to all Alaskans that they could have been paying a statutory PFD since day one? All of these questions may be answered today, but that final one I just gave, I doubt it will. They are only going to say that they did this because it was in a time of need, not because they are actually following the law, and they will go once again right back to the way things were last year and do everything they can to steal that permanent fund dividend once again. The bills that they pushed through this year made it very obvious where they all stand at. But when it comes to protecting our children, when they scream out there, we need more money for education. Well, when you look at the education funding was only $1.34 billion last year, and this year they're giving them $3.5 billion. 1.34, this year 3.5. That should tell you everything you need to know about the lies that are spreading about our education and the funding that is going on there. They have proven year after year that more money doesn't create better results. If it did, we wouldn't be ranked worst in the nation at triple the cost. I just did a budget review of the Ketchikan school district here the other day. One of the news outlets down there gave an extremely good breakdown. $48 million is being spent in the Ketchikan School District. They cater to 2,200 students. The total amount came out to $22,500 per student that they're spending in just the Ketchikan School District. This does not include all of the coronavirus money that they have sitting there in their pockets right here, right now, or the 300 to almost 400 million in capital improvement projects to the schools themselves that's in this current budget right now. that all came part of that infrastructure project. They're having every single penny of their bond debt being paid for by the state this year. They don't have to come up with that money themselves. They're sitting with hundreds of millions of dollars between all of our school districts in their slush fund accounts, but they're crying and whining, saying they have no money to operate with, that paying a permanent fund dividend unstabilizes them, even though that money to pay our dividends comes from the earnings reserve account, as the statutory PFD law states it should, and not one penny of the tax revenue that pays for our education is being spent to fund our permanent fund dividends. The only share us Alaskans get from this PFD, from this budget this year, that $4.5 billion in surplus that they had, is our energy rebate check. And that is what they have made threats to the governor, that if he doesn't veto that out of the budget, give them a promise, those legislators sitting in the room right now, promise them that he'll cut that from the budget. Otherwise, they're going to do everything they can to force the governor to do their whims. What is the next step? Where will it all go from here? We will soon find out. I am patiently trying to fill the void here in between them actually discussing it and at eases really suck. I tell you what, I'm listening to their elevator music in my headset right now, and it's hard to imagine anything else going on there in Juneau for what they got going on. I'm still just floored and flabbergasted by the corruption on full display and how they use that, or try to use that, to their advantage. How the unions have bravely come out and said only they, them only, they are the only ones that are allowed to have our money. Oh, there goes the gavel, back at it again.
Order. Representative Foster.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. Before you all, you've got two documents. One says the examples of common items in HB 281. I will not be speaking to the common items that are in the House budget and the budget passed out by the other body, but I thought it would be helpful for members to know that what is some of the highlights of what are in common. What I will be speaking to are the differences between the two budgets. And before you, you have 3 pages. It does say that there should be 6. It says 1 of 6, 2 of 6, 3 of 6. There are only 3 pages in case you think you're missing pages here. So with that, this should give you a good idea of what's different there. And for the public, I will go ahead and verbalize much of this, not everything. So before us is the state operating budget. There are quite a few things that our House version of the budget has in common with the other body's budget, including forward funding of education and payment of oil tax credits. Since we are in agreement on those items, again, those will not be conferenceable, and I will not address them. Madam Speaker, I will only be addressing the differences between the two budgets, and one of the biggest differences is the capital budget that has been inserted into this operating budget. And I will defer to the co-chair of the capital budget from Eagle River to explain the capital appropriations. Now, just to give folks a roadmap of how I will be explaining the changes, I'm going to first speak to the overall size of the budget and the difference between the two budgets. Then I'll speak to the permanent fund dividend, education, and then to reductions made by the other body to our budget. And finally, I'll be speaking to additions made by the other body to our budget. Madam Speaker, the total size of the operating budget passed over by the other body is $14.4 billion, all funds. And that number breaks down as follows. It's 8.7 billion UGF. And this number is larger than what you might normally see in other years because it includes a large permanent fund dividend as well as a energy relief check, and I'll get to that in a moment. It also includes 3.2 billion in federal funds and 2.5 billion in other funds. And then from here on out, I'll be referring mostly to unrestricted general funds, otherwise known as UGF, since that reflects state spending and excludes federal funds. Now, for comparison purposes, just looking at agency operations, and that would be all of our departments, Department of Corrections, Department of Education, and so forth. The House appropriated $4.1 billion, and the other body increased that by $58 million. Take a quick sip of coffee. Shifting to statewide items, excluding the permanent fund dividend, we appropriated $1.5 billion, and the other body increased that by $93 million. Now, none of these numbers that I'm quoting include, again, the capital appropriations. And as for the amount deposited to savings, our budget deposited $2.2 billion to the SBR, and the other body deposited $520 million. So switching gears here and speaking to the permanent fund dividend, our budget pays out a $1,250 PFD plus a $1,300 energy relief check for a total per person payout of $2,550. And the total cost of that is $1.7 billion. The other body funded a full PFD of $4,200 plus a $1,300 energy relief check for a total per person payout of $5,500. And the total cost of this is $3.5 billion. Switching over to education, the budget has language to forward fund $1.2 billion for education, but keep in mind that due to the size of the budget that's coming over from the other body, it does not have the money to pay for this forward funding. We approved a one-time $57 million increase to education that would only be paid out if the BSA bill increasing funding to education by the same amount does not pass. And the other body approved $60 million with no contingency language. Our body refilled the higher education fund with $395 million. And this will fund not only scholarships, but also the medical program known as WWAMI. And the other body did not refill the higher education fund, but they do fund scholarships and WWAMI with funds straight from the general fund and not the higher education fund. We appropriated an additional $5 million to pre-K, and this is to be spread out over 2 years, and the other body did not fund this additional amount that's already in the budget for pre-K. For the university, we appropriated $7 million for mariculture, and the other body appropriated $0. For school bond debt and REAA, rural school construction, we both funded next year's FY23 at 100%. And for FY22, we both funded the 50% that went unfunded last year. The other body took the additional step of funding the amounts that were not funded in FY17, FY20, and FY21. And for school bond debt, this comes to $212 million. And for the REAA schools, this comes out to an additional $84 million. The other body appropriated $4.3 million for residential school stipends. This body appropriated $0. And for the university's fixed and operating costs, we included $4 million, while the other body added $9.5 million. And finally, speaking to education, the other body has a two appropriation structure for the university so that Anchorage and Fairbanks campuses, their budgets are separated from the rest of the campuses throughout the state. Our budget maintains the traditional one appropriation structure. Now moving over to reductions that the other body made to our budget. Looks like I've got 8 or 9 items here. For the 404 water primacy funding, we funded $750,000 for FY22 and $4.9 million for FY23, and the other body appropriated no funds for the 404 program. For public assistance, we added $1.3 million in 20 positions. Those are full-time positions. The other body appropriated $700,000 in 10 temporary positions. For jury pay, we appropriated $2 million, and the other body appropriated $0. For mapping of mineral-rich state lands, we appropriated $750,000, and the other body has their line at $0. We fully capitalized all SWEP funds, like the Alaska Marine Vessel Replacement Fund and the Victims' Crime Compensation Fund, and the other body did not capitalize any of the SWEP funds. For Civil Air Patrol, we appropriated $250,000, and the other body has this at $0. For community jails, we increased funding by $4 million, while the other body funded a lesser amount. They funded this item at $2 million. And finally, with regard to the reductions made by the other body, for the Office of Public Advocacy, Public Defenders, Department of Law Attorneys, and Frontline Social Workers, we added $9.2 million, whereas the other body appropriated $0. Now moving over to the additions that the other body made to our budget. They added $5 million for the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, and they also added $495,000 for the API settlement, and we have $0 for both of these items in our budget. For home and community-based waiver services, we appropriated $8.1 million in UGF, while the other body appropriated $16.5 million as a UGF match and $16.5 million Fed. For VPSO raises, we penciled in a 5% pay increase backed by $618,000, and the other body has that amount at 10% for the raises and $1.2 million. For domestic violence and sexual assault, we appropriated $4.5 million, while the other body did $8.5 million. For statehood defense, we appropriated $2 million, while the other body put in $3 million. $500,000 of that $300 million is designated for the Tongass. The other body included $89 million for PERS pension fund. We did not appropriate funds for this item. The other body appropriated $106 million in UGF to the permanent fund Corpus if oil averages over $100 per barrel. And finally, with regard to additions made by the other body to our budget, the other body added $199 million for past royalty payments to go to the permanent fund Corpus. We do not have this in our budget. This is an item that our auditor has told us is due for a number of years now, and so this would fulfill that auditing requirement. And then speaking to two final miscellaneous items, we have a CBR reverse sweep section in our budget to recapitalize swept funds. However, the three-quarter vote failed in our body. The other body does not have a CBR section in their bill. And finally, the effective date in our budget failed, but it passed in the other body. So, Madam Speaker, these are the main changes to the operating budget, and after the changes to the capital budget are summarized, then I will be available to answer any questions that might come up. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Merrick, insofar as the capital budget changes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And as you know, the capital budget was rolled into the operating budget. So I'm not going to, the entire capital budget is a change, so I'm not going to go into specific dollar amounts and line items, but just give a general overview. I would like to begin by thanking the co-chair from Nome for his hard work and steadfast support while crafting this budget. And also thank you to my amazing staff, Tally Teal, Sorsha Hazelton, and Jamie Jones, for they worked tirelessly to ensure this was a fair and smart capital budget. I'm really pleased to say that I worked collaboratively with the co-chair in the other body, and our goal was to focus on statewide items like deferred maintenance, things that have been neglected for years of lean capital budgets. And I'm also proud to have worked with both majority and minority members on this floor to ensure that crucial projects around the state were funded. With a UGF spend of $1.2 billion for fiscal years 22 and 23, and an all funds total spend of $3.7 billion, this is our largest capital budget in more than a decade. And while I certainly don't support a bloated state government, the capital budget is necessary to invest in infrastructure throughout Alaska. Madam Speaker, every member on the floor today will take something home to their district, whether it's school major maintenance, food security, village safe water, workforce development, or transportation projects. This budget will help construct and maintain infrastructure throughout the state. It has UGF dollars as a match for federal infrastructure dollars, which from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IJA. This investment of 70 million UGF dollars will return more than 900 million in federal funds. There is money for ports of Alaska and ports of Nome. There's money for harbor matching grants, deferred maintenance at the University of Alaska, and programs reducing energy costs throughout the state. We are using the remaining coronavirus capital project funds, which have strict guidelines to improve broadband and access to work, school, and healthcare, both in rural and urban Alaska. Madam Speaker, the Alaska State Legislature should be very proud to approve this capital budget. And with that, I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the changes in 281? Seeing no discussion, Representative Kirka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When the news came over from the other body that the change in this budget was going to include a full PFD, I was very excited. And I got caught up in the emotionalism of the moment and forgot that this was actually a budget we were talking about. In fact, I didn't know at the time, but it was the biggest budget in state history. And I'm not counting the amounts for the permanent fund from those previous budgets or this budget. And I said to my caucus, and I said publicly that I'd be willing to vote for this, but I need two things. I need a full statutory dividend, and I need us to stop paying for abortions, Madam Speaker. And we didn't get that. But I also want to stay true to my promises I made to my district when I ran for office, Madam Speaker, to vote against bloated budgets. And these changes in this budget make it the biggest budget in state history. And many are saying, "Hey, well, look at this full statutory dividend in the budget, and look at the back pay in here." And that's exciting, but at this point in time, I don't even know how much of that's actually on the table, because there's been a lot of conversations and discussions and negotiations not out in the open. I don't know how much that's been promised to be vetoed. So for those reasons, Madam Speaker, I can't support the biggest budget in state history. Without confidence, we're not going to get a full PFD, and without ending to abortion funding.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Tilton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This budget's big. It's kind of shocking, especially when you're a fiscal conservative. But what I would say about this budget is that the thing that constituency is worried about is the growth of government. At least that's what my constituency is we're concerned about. And when you look at the agency operations, there's some increase in agency operations. From 2016, we heard that the co-chair from the other body said that it's really a small increase. And so if you add that with inflation, it's really basically a flat budget in agency operations. Would I like to see agency operations reduced? Absolutely, Madam Speaker. But you have to take into consideration the other things. One thing about a very large capital budget, and that is where the growth is in the capital budget, is I believe what I read was that it was 486% growth in the capital budget, and that's a lot. But Madam Speaker, the items in the capital budget allow for economy. They allow for the things that, thank you to the co-chair of the the capital budget here behind me, giving her talk. It allows for this deferred maintenance that we haven't taken care of in our state. And, I always say, take care of the things you already own. We need to do that. Finish the things you have, but and take care of your needs over your wants. And it looks like, there's some projects in here, sure, that aren't near and dear to my heart, but I'm guessing they're near and dear to somebody's heart, or they wouldn't be in this budget. I don't recall having a whole lot of conversation or input personally of what I needed from my district, but I want to tell you that I can look at this budget and say, yeah, there is a little bit, looks like for everybody. So when you think about a capital budget is something that it creates economy for the state. It's something that people have been asking for. The business community, the people of Alaska, they want to see the infrastructure. They want the roads to be, they want the roads improved. And I will say one thing that I know that is sitting here in this budget for the Mat-Su Borough is there is a $30 million match to $30 million of a bond issue that the Mat-Su Borough put forward years ago. So the people are willing to match that money. The people in the Mat-Su Borough are willing to match that road money. And so I'm really thankful that being considered in this budget. There's a lot of concern, Madam Speaker, about some items that might not be in the budget. And I think that we sitting here on the floor have taken some votes on some of those items that have to do with abortion funding. I will tell you, Madam Speaker, that is a sensitive subject here on the floor, but I can tell you, Madam Speaker, for my district, it's really important. It's a piece that we put into the budget. It's somewhat, I hate to say this, it's somewhat symbolic, though, Madam Speaker, because we know that the courts say that it is not a lawful thing, and do we have to listen to the courts? No, we don't. We're the appropriators. But, Madam Speaker, I'm looking forward to when there is actually outcome and a decision made on a certain court case that will allow that to be something that we can do, and we can hold that out of our budget, and that we don't have to worry about what the courts say about it. We can remove that still, Madam Speaker. There's still the opportunity when we look at this budget moving forward off of the desks of us, and if this budget is concurred to, there is the opportunity for vetoes for some of those things that may be in the budget that might not harm anybody. There is that opportunity that, if it does go to conference, that maybe things will get fixed, but I don't see that happening, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the biggest thing in this budget is that there is money for the very first time in 6 years. We, sitting here on this floor, have the opportunity to vote for a statutory dividend that is in a final budget document, Madam Speaker. It's not an amendment that may or may not make it in. This is your chance right now to show the people of Alaska that you want to follow the law, that the people of Alaska matter. The people of Alaska have been waiting for this day. I got a call, Madam Speaker, in my office, and not that it would change, not that I already have my mind made up, but I got a call in my office, Madam Speaker, that actually brought my whole office to tears. There was a gentleman that called my office, and I know we're all getting a lot of calls, and we're all getting a lot of emails, and but there's the one that stood out. He not from the business community, not from, not even maybe from my district. I don't know. But Madam Speaker, this gentleman was 80 years old, living at home with his wife, who is 79 years old. I can't even pronounce his last name, or I would say his name. He was in tears, Madam Speaker. He and his wife, he's taking care of his elderly wife. He's trying not to be on assistance. He's taking care of his elderly wife. and himself, and they both have dialysis. They're both not doing well. And Madam Speaker, he was in tears asking that my vote be to approve of this statutory dividend for him and his wife. So, Madam Speaker, with all that said, I would ask everybody to join in and concur in this budget.
Thank you. Representative Laban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'd like to congratulate this body for passing out a budget to the Senate that was in balance. And I would like to maybe reframe this discussion a little bit and suggest that if the state of Alaska were my customer at the bank and coming to me for a loan and presented the budget we received from the other body, my first observation would be that the budget shows a deficit. And I would ask the state of Alaska, how did you arrive at your revenue numbers? And I would hear that the projected price of oil was based upon a 5-day look-back period that was at a high point in the current calendar year. So the revenue number was very optimistic. But okay, that's what the budget was based on. Then I would ask, what is your oil throughput? Because, Madam Speaker, the state of Alaska relies heavily on a commodity, sale of our oil for our revenue. And I would be told that the projection was generous by today's standard. We all track the throughput of the pipeline. So the combination of the projected price of oil and the throughput of the pipeline created a revenue projection for fiscal year 23 that we all have to agree on is fairly optimistic. Even with that optimistic number, it still is projecting a deficit. So what does it require to balance? It requires those projections, those very optimistic projections being realized. It requires a draw on the statutory budget reserve. It also calls on a generous use of federal dollars to balance our budget. It utilizes all $1 billion of the federal SLRF dollars to balance the budget. And without the use of the statutory budget reserve dollars and federal dollars, we would have a deficit of over $1 billion. I get it that we all would like to see as large a PFD as possible. And we all have constituents that are encouraging that type of an action with the House and the other body. But I'm just wondering out loud, how sustainable is this projection based upon a $5,500 PFD? Our obligation to the state of Alaska is to pass a balanced budget. A year ago in district, I was asked by a constituent why we struggle so much to pass a balanced budget. I get it that there's needs and wants. In the state, a lot of folks, and we're all part of that too, want the maximum PFD, but the other side of that argument is the needs of the state. We need to support roads, troopers, public education. All the agencies come to us during the budget process with their needs. And we hear, and we must balance the needs with the wants. Just real quick, and I'll wrap up here. The Alaska Permanent Fund, if you look at over the last 30 days, we've lost some value if you follow where the Alaska Permanent Fund value has been over the last 30 days. It's about $3 billion. Our draw from the earnings reserve to fund the fiscal year 23 budget is $3.3 billion. We've lost in 30 days the equivalent of a draw for fiscal year 23. And I know members of this body also track the financial markets. The financial markets have been down lately. The Standard & Poor's 500 is down 16% year-to-date. NASDAQ is down 25% year-to-date. Dow Jones is down 7% year-to-date. So why does that matter to us? It's because the Alaska Permanent Fund is heavily invested in the markets. There's a connectivity to all this. I would just like to remind the body that our first order of business is passing a balanced budget. And Madam Speaker, this budget from the other body does not balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not a banker. I did watch Finance yesterday. The Finance Committee and the other body. There was a slide in there and a question asked, is this budget balanced? At the end of the day, at the end of next fiscal year, there will be an $800 million surplus. I'm not sure what it takes for a banker to balance a budget, but to me that means the budget is balanced and then some. After everything is paid in this big, huge budget, after the capital projects are paid, we have $522 million in the SBR, $1.3 billion in the CBR, $15.6 billion in the ERA. Our surplus on June 30th is predicted to be $500 million, and that doesn't include the $500 million plus of ARPA funding that we have not received yet from the federal government. Inside of that big bloated budget, we have also paid for education. $1.3 billion for K through 12, $108 million for school maintenance, $299 million for school bond debt reimbursement, $116 million REAA, for a total of $2.289 billion going to education in some form or another. That's pretty good if you ask me. If you include it with the capital budget, it's also pretty good if you ask me. Let's be very clear. The over $5,000 that we're talking about is not the PFD. The full PFD is $4,200. The additional $1,300 is something called an Energy Relief Fund that this body passed. And we need to separate those. For sure, Alaskans need to understand. $4,200 is the full PFD. $1,300 is something called an energy relief money, which came out of our body. Madam Speaker, we're looking at $17 a gallon gasoline in the villages this winter. $9 or over $9 a gallon fuel heating oil. You've heard me say it before in Fairbanks this winter in the heating season. How many people in Fairbanks rely on fuel oil to heat their homes? Now, if we're going to switch to talking about financial markets, we need to look at the oil markets. Most of China right now is on a lockdown. Their inflation rate is 2%. Nobody's moving anywhere. They're in their houses. Once they come out of that COVID lockdown, their inflation rate is going to skyrocket, and 11-point-some billion people in Shanghai are going to start driving again and using oil that they don't have. It's going to drive the price of oil through the roof. The Ukraine debacle, or whatever you want to call it, in Europe is already causing Germany, oil prices in Germany to skyrocket. They're talking about losing 50% of their oil from Russia. Some estimates I've seen on the oil, price of oil per barrel, are going to be north of $175 per barrel. I get that we don't want to rely on that, but I think what we relied on is about half that for our financial predictions. So to me, Madam Speaker, all the doom and gloom that came out of a failed article in one of the local Anchorage newspapers is just wrong. It's hype, it's fear-mongering, and I think that it needs to go away. I think the true financial health of this state needs to be published. And those numbers that I just gave you, those are from Ledge Finance. So I'm not sure how we can possibly say that our budget is not balanced. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Tar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise because I just feel compelled to kind of speak on what's taking place here. The sort of predicament we find ourselves in is because of the failure of us to resolve the dividend situation over the last 7 years. fully responsible, every single one of us, for getting ourselves into the predicament we find ourselves in right now. And it just so happened that we got the Center for Economic Development, Economic and Demographic fact sheets in our mailboxes today. So I'm sitting here looking at mine. I have a 37% poverty rate in my district for children under 18. I have an overall 27% poverty rate for all individuals. Individuals aged 25% with bachelor's degree or higher, just 18%. I know that what my neighbors do with their dividend checks is pay for college. That's what they use their dividend checks for. So in making changes today, and there are other parts of the budget, what is even sadder about this whole scenario is that we've reduced our state to being about one thing, a dividend, because we can't seem to get anything else done to resolve it. It's the only topic. It shuts down the legislature. We can't get other important items done. I don't know how anyone could feel good about that. But it also puts those of us that represent lower income districts in the position of having to take from our children and our seniors to fix our financial problems. And I also don't know how anybody can feel good about that. So when I have to vote today to reduce the dividend, I will be taking from the 37% of children in my district that live in poverty. I can't believe as policymakers we can't do better than that. So I will probably vote not to concur today, as I've done every year, as I've marched through this fire trying to get us to a resolution. What would be really great is if there's to be some other people who'd be willing to compromise too.
Thank you. Representative Vance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And the comments of the previous speaker are compelling. I just hope that you get what you've asked for. Because Alaskans have been asking for us to follow the law for more than 6 years. That's why many of us are here in this body. There's been so much discussion around the dollar amount of the dividend, and I think that that is a red herring. Because Alaskans are asking us to follow the formula. It's not about a big, fat cash payout, as the media often portrays it. We have a formula in place that used to fluctuate every year depending on our investments. Much like most of you, I grew up watching the Channel 2 news late at night for the small child to lift up the big flash card that gave the dollar amount of what the dividend would be that year. And it was never used as a political football because it was the first draw. It was a transfer, and the people knew that it was their resource wealth. And yet here we are. We have pit every single government service and program against the people's resource wealth. It was never about the big dollar amount. It fluctuated from year to year, and people didn't seem to be concerned. They kept an eye on those investments because it mattered to them. They didn't rely on that money as a fixed amount in their income as a welfare check. It was their dividend from their corporation, as it should still be. So when we get accused of buying votes, as I have once again been accused of, I find it highly disingenuous. I truly believe in the dividend program, in the permanent fund and the dividend program as according to law. I don't care if it's $1, it still belongs to the people, and it is our duty to transfer it to them without making it political. Shame on us that we continue to feed the lie that says that they would have to give up education or roads or public safety in order for them to get what is rightfully theirs. And people from this body, we've done it year after year. We are constitutionally mandated to provide for education. So I want to remind the public, education will be funded next year no matter what. Public safety will be funded no matter what. You will have roads. You will have infrastructure. And this budget provides that. This is such an interesting discussion that the table has now turned that so many people are calling this an irresponsible budget. And I just wonder If the dividend had not been a full statutory lawful dividend, if the same people would be calling this budget irresponsible. Because it has precisely the very things that you've been asking for several years now. Our economy is suffering. Inflation is incredibly high. The people are hungry. They're trying to figure out how they're going to be able to put gas in their tank and fuel in their homes and be able to provide. All the way from our children to our seniors. Just the statutory dividend is about $75 million to every single House district. With the $1,300 Energy Relief Check, which is also coming from the earnings reserve, the same place as the dividend, that would mean about $99 million to every single House district's economy. This is something that cannot be ignored. It is not wasted money. It is put directly into the hands of Alaska and Alaska's economy, which helps jobs, which provides the boost that cannot be argued. Our university has said that nothing else stimulates Alaska's economy like the dividend. I also want to highlight that this budget also transfers $1 billion from the earnings reserve to the corpus of the permanent fund. In the last 2 terms, the 4 years that I've been here, approximately $10 billion has been transferred to the corpus of the fund that cannot be touched by this body, that continues to increase the permanent fund that state services and the people have relied on. So to say that this budget is irresponsible, that we are not providing for our future, is also highly disingenuous. I think we need to be honest with ourselves. We either prioritize the people as the first, with the first draw, and then look to everything else that could be reduced, or we look at the government services that we think we may need in the future. I hope today that we make the right decision by following the law and listening to the voice of the people. I make this argument year after year, and finally I can get to a yes. It's a pretty good feeling, Madam Speaker, and I hope everyone shares it with me today.
Thank you. Representative McKay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Privileged to speak to everyone this morning about such an important topic. As you know, my district is Southwest Anchorage, probably one of the more affluent districts in the state. I have business leaders, business owners, large corporate executives that live in my district that they would want me to vote no today. But I plan to vote yes, because when I look around after we come out of this pandemic depression, I don't think about just the kids in my district. I think about the kids in District 19, District 7 behind me, District 1. I think about the kids all over the state. The kids in Western Alaska. I was told by one company that came into my office a month ago, they said that 40% of Anchorage is below the poverty line. I was pretty surprised that it was 40%. That's almost half of Anchorage that lives below poverty. So, Madam Speaker, I plan to vote yes on this because I want to help these people, and I'm taking a statewide view. I represent one district out of 40, but I'm looking at our whole state to help everyone. And I think we should do this. Ledge Finance says the budget is balanced. I'm not sure where my great friend from District 1 can claim that it's not. And with that, I'll close, Madam Speaker, and encourage everyone to vote yes so that we can help everyone come out of this pandemic and recession that we're in, and also inspire us to work on a long-term fiscal plan. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is there further briefities?
Nice listening to Representative McKay there, pointing out the statistics on how many people in Alaska are living in poverty. It was really nice to hear the numbers being expressed. That was given at the very beginning of the legislative session back in January, beginning of February, when they were having committee meetings, listening to all the statistics and reviewing all of the budgets from the prior year and where they stand at. And the Department of Health and Social Services was declaring how many people had been shoved into poverty. We were less than 1/3 of our population pre-pandemic, and then they reported that we were at approximately 38% of our population is now living in poverty thanks to the pandemic and the games that they continue to play down there in Juneau. So it's really nice to see those numbers are making the rounds. I wish mainstream media would pick up on this themselves and actually begin telling us all the truth and not the lies that they continue to spin to all of us down there. I am no surprise by what Kirka had to declare there, his moral standards about abortion. I can understand them, but he damn well knows that our Supreme Court year after year, our court system year after year, every time they strip that abortion funding out of the budget, it gets put right back in. And to say that 730,000 people are going to pay the price for something that is nothing more than a symbolic gesture saying you stand for your moral principles is atrocious and astounding. His run for governor, he has just literally slit his own throat and figuratively for what he has just declared there on the floor today. I don't see him ever even having a chance as becoming governor of our state after what he has just said. Laban is another one. They're false principles that they cannot pay the permanent fund dividend, that this budget is unsustainable, that it never should be in, that they shouldn't be following the law that we have that's been on the books for 4 decades, for the first time in 7 years following the law. He says this is reckless spending. It's overspending what they had, a balanced budget. Balanced by whose standards? Bottom line to it, whose standards is this budget actually balanced? I look at it, and if you look at the illegal funding for K through 12, the forward funding they did, that $1.2 billion, if they were to remove that out, just as our court systems is going to do when the lawsuit gets filed and it makes it in front of them, they will remove that money. Our Constitution, our state law says that they cannot bind the next legislative body to any funding that they themselves did not appropriate. The current legislative body in power in that given year is the only one that can dictate how those funds get spent. They cannot obligate future legislative bodies to their spending. It is against our Constitution. It is against our state laws. But they don't want to point that out. Another argument given to me earlier today. Well, we're giving $3.6 billion to Alaskans for their permanent fund and the Energy Rebate Check combined. It's closer to $4 billion, but you can say $3.5 billion if you want, $3.6 billion. And you can make those false claims that it should go to education. Yet here's education with the illegal forward funding added on top of it, a whopping $3.5 billion. Nearly three times what it costs them per year to be able to operate the worst education in the nation for education in K through 12. I mean, we're ranked number 52 when you include Puerto Rico and Guam, and they also declared DEED, same committee hearings that was given back in January and February, declared we are worse than many third world countries when it comes to providing an education. And they think throwing more money at them is going to solve the problem. We've watched how more money doesn't solve the problem. Ketchikan just came out, school district just came out with their budget and what they're proposing to pass there at the local level, and it's $48 million. They have 2,200 students going to school in that district. That broke down to $22,380 some dollars going to each and every one of those students to provide them the worst education in the nation. And they say that we're not overspending when it comes to education. They make claims at the local level. They're only spending $7,000 per student. They don't want you to take a look at the state spending and the federal spending that gets added on to the local level. When you got places like Bethel that absolutely almost nothing comes at the local level to supply their education there in their communities, it's all paid for by the state. It's all paid for using federal funds. Barely a penny of their local taxes goes towards actually paying for that education. Gavelled in.
Will the House please come back to order? Is there a further debate on House Bill 281? Representative Cronk.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Boy, I had pages and pages and pages of stuff to talk about here, but I'm not going to. I'm not going to go through them all.
Thank you, Representative Cronk.
I mean, I can show you some, but
oh no, that's fine.
One of I think the most disheartening things for me in this process here, is the fear factor that is presented probably in every email I've seen. And one of the most disingenuous things I heard was, we are gutting education. That's just simply not true. We're not gutting education. We actually added money to education. And that is really frustrating. Fear factor solves nothing. That is not leadership. Fear factor is being shot at for 10 minutes straight, wondering if your friend was going to survive. Fear factor is, am I going to keep my home heated? Fear factor is, can I feed my kids? That's fear. The rhetoric that we see in our emails, that's not fear. That's just rhetoric. And it's really disappointing that we go there to create this false narrative. One of my friends, state employee, he's like, let's look at it this way. A state employee makes $60,000 a year. If we paid a full PFD at $4,200, that's a 7% increase to their salary. 7% that they get to keep. We're not looking at that. We're looking at special interest groups that are telling us, please don't put the money into individual Alaskans' hands. That's really frustrating. I want to say 250,000 people in this state are below poverty level. I represent rural Alaska. Who in this body are the voice for those people? Who are the voice for the kids? Who are the voice for the seniors that can't heat their home? Who are the voice for those seniors that are actually raising grandkids now? They have to feed those grandkids. Who are those voices? I can tell you right now, my vote today is a vote for every individual Alaskan to pull them from the desk. Maybe they need a little help. Maybe that family of four, this dividend here, gets them that down payment for a new house. That's life-changing. Maybe it gets them a car that's reliable to get to work. Those are life-changing things. The single most life-changing thing we can do as a body is to make sure that our people are taken care of. And right now, I know for a fact I have messages from rural Alaska. They are hurting. They've been hurting, and they're going to hurt. We know oil prices are not dropping. And what happens when the new shipments of gas and fuel oil come to these villages this year and the price goes up to $25 a gallon? Are we going to have to create new programs? How about we put the money in their hand so they can take care of themselves? How about we pull people from the depths so we are creating a sense of pride? They are doing things for themselves. I will be a yes vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Kaufman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to respectfully be a no today on concurrence, but I absolutely understand why many here are yeses. There are compelling, and there's, this budget, as some have said, that came back from the Senate, has something for everyone in it. It's just got a lot of it. So I don't think ill and won't speak ill of anyone that votes for it. I understand. On the other hand, what I'm focusing on is not a single line item or specific things that are in it. I'm focusing on what I promised when I was running for office, and that was that I would seek to try and break the boom-bust economic cycles that we have in this state, which are so characteristic of it. When we have money, we spend it, and then when we don't, we're in a panic looking for it. And so I won't say that this budget won't work, but I will say is that it does reflect that our revenues have come up and our spending's trailed right along with it. Some argue it exceeds our revenue potential. I won't even go there. I don't need to. What I'm focusing on, and my vote today, will reflect that I promise to seek balance, to seek control mechanisms such as a spending cap that would try and moderate our spending. So I understand everyone's point, absolutely respect it, but because of what I promised, I'm going to have to vote no simply because I'm seeking control limits in what we spend so that we break that cycle just a little bit. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kaufman. Representative McCarty.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm on the Poverty and Opportunity Task Force. And I think both of them go together. Looking at what are kind of demands, needs that's creating poverty, but what are opportunities that also exist out there. As we look at this budget, it's not an inflated thing of just blowing money, but it's like money that has come in last year. This didn't exist. This discussion was like we had very limited funds and we were trying to make things happen with those funds. And then a phenomenon took place. And so now all of a sudden we're dealing with more funds, but we're not just like saying, well, let's just throw out the money onto frivolous things. We're putting into infrastructure for the future, for the economy of Alaska and all Alaskans in it. That means jobs. That means care of roads, care of different things. So I see that in this budget here, and I greatly appreciate that. Being someone who lived in Kodiak, that we know that the weather changes every hour.
Okay, well, Representative McCarty, if I could just interrupt you for a moment. I've been pretty wide open on this, but I just want to remind you, as well as all members, we're speaking to the changes in the budget, the changes that came back from the Senate. So please proceed. We're not speaking to the underlying budget. We're speaking to the changes that came back in the budget.
Thank you. I'm speaking to that too.
Okay.
And so getting back to the piece of being mindful of needs that exist and mindful of economic changes that take place, just like weather of Kodiak, that we've got to be able to adapt. Here we're adapting to saying we have the funds to be able to take care of these different things. We have the funds to give a statutory permanent fund dividend to individuals. Another piece in this is the inflation of the dollar. So what I could purchase just a year ago buying diesel at $2.15 a gallon, now it's $5-something a gallon in my district, and as we've heard from other districts, it's far more than that. To be able to give, in the case of the permanent fund dividend, give the money to the people now so they could purchase things and actually have it, rather than find out that that dollar is worth less not far down the road. And so we want to give that to them now so they could have the food, they could have the fuel, they could have those things for the security. Certainly we've all received comments from people all over in our district, from all over the state. And this past week, receiving a comment from a military mother who's gone to different resources that we have in the state to deal with her autistic child. And those resources don't exist in the state. This family has to go outside the state, use their limited funds that they have, which they don't have much. This mother is stressed out and creating panic attack issues for them, trying to advocate for their child. And the biggest thing that could happen for them is to give them money, which is not a handout, it's a dividend that exists as stockholders in the state. And I think that this mother represents so many other mothers in our state that are wanting to make sure that their family is taken care of. And I think that's the opportunity we have before us, to take care of the people of Alaska, take care of the infrastructure of Alaska, take care of the education of Alaska, and this bill represents that synergy there. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Prox.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support and encourage people to concur with the budget that came to us from the other body. The changes, thank you for reminding us to stick to changes. The biggest change in my mind is the increase to the dividend to bring it up to the statutorily calculated amount. And that was very important to me. That's very important to the people in District 3. And it complies with Article 1, Section 1 of our Constitution to treat everyone equally. And that is very important, Madam Speaker. Everyone gets a dividend. Those that need it to meet their daily expenses or to buy something that will help improve their life. They talked about maybe somebody needs an automobile, maybe somebody needs a down payment on a house, whatever. Those people can use it as they see fit. In other situations, people might not need that money. And I tried to promote a bill to make it easier for people to return that money to the state if they feel that they would rather spend it on state services. But they are still free to do that. If someone thinks that their dividend check is too high, they really don't need it, and they would like to support other services, they're free to do that. They can just send the check right back to the state, and the state will gladly accept that and put that in the treasury. But it gives everybody that decision, and they are more able to make those individual decisions. By making individual decisions, I should say, we are able to come up to the greater public good. The alternative, which I am concerned about, if we don't concur, is that the dividend amount will go away. Everything else will be kept, and everything else only supports specific groups. Some of those might be very large, as in the case of educations, but it's still a specific group. Might be transportation, highways, whatever it is, it's a specific group. And the letters that I received from individuals were to support and they were written by individuals to support the dividend. And I received a bunch of form letters, very obviously from specific groups. And it kind of reinforced my decision that I was going the right way, that we're here to represent everyone equally, and paying out the permanent fund dividend does just exactly that. And we're not here to support special groups. We should prioritize individuals, let them make the decision that is the best for them, and they can do with it what they want. So I encourage that, and I do think the total amount puts us closer than I would like to the long-term sustainability. I think there is some concern about that. The money that's proposed, I guess that's the same, but that extra money that's proposed for the energy dividend, that's a one-time. There's no expectation that that will continue into the future. And we're going to be able to save some money that was surplus from this current year's budget. That will assuage that. I think in the near term, in the long term, I'm sure that oil prices are going to moderate. In the near term, the likelihood is that the oil prices are going to stay high enough that this will get us through the next couple of years until we take care of my other priority, which we didn't discuss, was the long-term fiscal plan. But as a short-term interim until we get around this discussion, I prefer to give that money back to the people according to the statute that we promised them when they filled out their application. So I support concurrence with the budget that we have before us.
Thank you. Is there further discussion? Representative Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, you've appropriately cautioned us to speak to the changes. Neither the House version nor the Senate version really reflected a long-term fiscal plan, so I assume that that's off the table. I wish it wasn't. I wish it's very germane. I think the main sticking point here between the two budgets is the size of the dividend. Seems germane to me to a long-term fiscal plan. Over the last several years since I've been here, we have been in the opposite situation where we've had very little money and more bills, and we've been struggling to balance the budget. I remember every year the rhetoric that says, you know what, that statutory formula, it's a thing of the past. It only works when we've got a high price of oil. And here we are in a year where oil's over $100 a barrel. We've got a high price of oil, and now we're saying, yeah, that statutory formula, it just doesn't work. And I would just say, well, then any excuse will do, Madam Speaker. I would like to use an example in the budget to highlight this problem. 7,100 people, thereabouts, have requested assistance from the state Department of Agriculture to help put in gardens in their houses to help feed their family. 7,100. Because we've got a program to help them do that. You know how many grants they have to be able to give out this year? About 300. Madam Speaker, do you know how much money is at stake for those families, those 300 families? Somewhere between $3,000 to $5,000, depending on their ask. Don't really like doing public math on the fly, but you've got 7,100 people asking and 300 people receiving. And here we are with an opportunity to fill the gap by following the statutory formula and paying out a statutory dividend that's $4,400 per person. And those families that are looking to the state for a handout through federal dollar program that's funded in our budget but can't meet the need, well, that need can be met today, right now. We can follow our statutory formula while we have a high price of oil, and we can pay out a statutory PFD, and those families that the government's gonna say no to, you don't get help putting gardens in to feed your family, won't have to worry, because the other part of the state money that we have access to is going to them, and they can spend it on planting a garden, they can spend it on fuel, they can spend it on maybe take some time off work and spend it with their family. I don't know. It's their decision. It's their life. Madam Speaker, the policy call that we're making right now with the changes between the two budgets, it's a policy call. We like to get our heads down in the weeds and throw numbers around, and really the big picture is, are we going to enable the state money that we have and the state formulas and the state laws that we have put in place to benefit individuals and how they see fit? That there's an expectation over the last decades that that's what continues, we follow the law, or are we going to set aside that portion of money that should go out, and we're going to enable state spending on state services, on nonprofits, on all of the infrastructure and the business community and the demand for state services? Are we going to prioritize that in a time when we have high oil? Or are we going to say yes to individuals in Alaska who have just come through a pandemic where we, the government, told them you can't go to work, you're non-essential. Your business needs to close down because you're non-essential. That's the policy call that's being made in this budget. we're going to say yes or no to one group of folks. If you concur with the budget, you're saying yes to paying a statutory PFD. If you object to the budget, object to the concurrence, then you're saying to all of the programs and all of the state funding that's currently in the budget and all of those employees of the state, you're going to be fully funded for the next year. You were fully funded last year. None of the state employees lost their jobs last year. The folks that we're going to say no to for a permanent fund dividend with this policy call, many of them lost their jobs last year. They had to go through their savings just to survive. And we're going to make a policy call that says, no. Even if we've got the money now, we're going to prioritize it over here for this group of people. We're not going to prioritize it for you. Madam Speaker, it's wrong on so many levels. Because I can't talk about a fiscal policy conversation here, we are also not talking about growing or having some impact on the size of our economy, where those folks, not the government officials, because they don't ever lose their jobs, these folks, growing the economy. What does a couple $2 billion of our permanent fund earnings going into the non-oil economy, what does that do for the people who have businesses? That helps grow our economy when we just came out of a crisis situation where we told people they can't operate their business. Why are we making a policy call that says take care of government, but not making a policy call that says take care of people in our non-government positions? Madam Speaker, policy call is very clear to me that Alaskans expect the legislature to take care of Alaskans. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, I sat here for the past several years and heard about how the market is going to be our salvation, our budget salvation, our fiscal. We don't really need a plan. That's kind of the subtext of what I hear, because the market keeps going up, we keep adding money to it, and the market only goes up. Well, that's not happening, Madam Speaker. Our market is dropping, and we're watching as we're losing money daily, billions of dollars. We're below 80 billion now. I think our high was around 84 billion. And the money that we put into the market doesn't go to help and invest in Alaska. It goes into invest in places all over the world. We take a little bit out and we invest it in our state government and in our permanent fund dividend, but not much. Everyone knows the terms buy low and sell high. Well, it's time to pull that money out of the market, Madam Speaker. Right now, we're losing money daily, and this budget and taking the money out to give it to Alaskans as we prescribe to do, because we know that oil and the market are counter-cyclical. Oil goes up, profits are lower because it costs more to run businesses. So I see the wisdom of having this capital budget this year, a high capital budget, not a high operating budget. This isn't a high operating budget. This is a high capital budget. We have not had a capital budget. We have deferred maintenance. We have roads in disrepair. We don't have expansion and the opportunities. I mean, just the thought that we were going to have a capital budget this year gave people a little higher spring in their step. It gave businesses and business owners that I know a little sense of excitement that maybe Alaska was coming back. We have hit bottom in the last several years, and businesses have hurt because of that. Our oil exploration, our mineral exploration, we haven't put the money into that we should, or to continue to progress forward. So I'm a fan of a larger capital budget. I'm a fan of a larger capital budget when it means taking that money and spending it now while the market is not our friend. Our market is taking our was taking all that savings that we put in there. I'm thinking of all the billions of dollars that we've transferred over the last several years, and they're just gone away. Poof, they're just gone. So take this opportunity to invest in Alaska, not invest in the rest of the world. Invest in your friends, your neighbors, the jobs and the opportunity that Alaska has and is known for. And this just makes sense. We're going to fix a lot of the things that we have before us, the changes that we have. I think they just make sense. So I will be a yes vote.
Thank you. Representative Rauscher.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate it. I've been here now 6 years. And for 6 years, and I want to speak to the PFD because it's one of the changes that we experienced in this version here. So for 6 years, the PFD has been arbitrary. It's been a number that we decided to use. But the law says we have a formula, and it was set many years back in the 80s. And so why was it set back to a formula? Because people who are making over $50,000, over $100,000, over $150,000 a year can't sit around and decide according to their income what the rest of the state should each get on a PFD. And that's why there's a formula out there. This budget right here is the first time we've actually let our own decisions, our own bank books, our own checkbooks, our personal checkbooks out of the picture. And we've worked with what is in law, which is a formula. And that formula is there to keep us from looking at our own bank book. So here we are, and we've finally done that. And I believe the opportunity that we have right now to follow this formula is also an opportunity to look forward to actually working towards solving the yearly argument. How much should it be? How much shouldn't it be? Well, that's what it looks like when it is a full PFD, irregardless of what we want it to be, irregardless of what we think it should be, irregardless of how we feel this fiscal, we need to actually have this conversation in the next year. And so I believe that following it for once in 6 years will aid that. But I also believe that there are people in my district who have lost jobs due to COVID, who have lost jobs one way or another when it comes to vaccines, who have lost opportunities during the COVID scare where their families were hurting, their mortgages are suffering, they're trying to get back on their feet. I'm making over $50,000 just on this job alone, and so is everybody in this room. So is everybody in the other body. And there are some of us who have more than one job. Some of us are very well blessed. But I believe that there are some people in my district that are hurting. And I think that this PFD following the formula is a good reason for me to vote for this piece of legislation, this operating budget. Some people are worried about the size. I think the member from 14 has stated it very well. The capital budget is now in the operating budget. That makes it a very big budget. If it was just an operating budget, it wouldn't look this size. It wouldn't look this size at all, but it's a capital budget stuffed in there too, which makes it an awful large-looking budget. But we also learned in Senate Finance that it's balanced. So I'm going to be supporting this budget. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you. Representative Gillum.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure how this is going to come out, but I got so much stuff I'd like to say. I don't know one person in this building that needs a dividend. I don't need it. My family doesn't need it. But when I come to work here, I'm one of the first people in this building. Myself and my colleague from District 1, we kind of have a personal thing to see who gets here first. But on many mornings, there's a gentleman down here on the sidewalk asleep in a sleeping bag. I don't know him, probably will never meet him. The difference between a $2,500 dividend and a $4,400 dividend, or $5,500 with the extra $1,300, could be the difference of that person, I don't know if it's a man or a woman, being able to get cleaned up, get a place to live, be able to go out and get a job, change their life. I don't know. But for that one person, I'm willing to make that decision. I hear a lot of people say, 35, 37% of their districts are in poverty. Well, I'm looking at one person on a sidewalk. If I can help that one person, it's well worth it. So those that have people living in poverty in your district, I would wholeheartedly ask, please vote for this budget. Maybe, I know it's not sustainable. We're not asking for this from now on. We're asking for now to help our people right now. So please, I would ask to vote for concurrence. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Rasmussen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to remind the body that the permanent fund dividend was not ever intended to become a program almost as an additional public assistance program, which I've heard reference about how many Alaskans need the dividend. And I find it challenging to wrap my mind around because the dividend is Alaskans' relationship with resource development in my mind. I think that our oil prices have been high, production has remained at very stable or slightly increasing levels, and when we have the ability to continue to highlight the significance that resource development plays in our state in the form of a check to Alaskans, I think that that is why we should continue to push for the existence of the dividend program. I recognize that in recent years, our revenues from oil has declined based on the market, and we've gone from, I think at our height, maybe 2 million barrels a day down to about 500,000-ish barrels a day. And so that decline in combination with the prudent investment of the permanent fund has led us to be able to continue to pay a healthy dividend to every Alaskan. That said, Alaska would need to look at, in order to maintain a payment at the statutory level, which I am going to support today because we're the body for the last 4 years that has been, in my time here, has been stating the need to change the formula. And I think just as important as it is for us to provide predictable funding for our schools here in the state, I think that we should also continue a predictable formula for Alaskans and end the process of choosing an arbitrary number to pay out for dividends. What I will say about this budget, and I want to really commend my finance co-chairs and the members of the other body in putting together a very, very strong capital budget for Alaskans. It does have great projects to be excited about across the state. I see notes from business groups about opposition to the budget before us, but I think it's important to note that we're looking at, because we have no capital budget currently in the House, so I get to speak to the capital budget, $70 million of general fund from the state, and an investment of $70 million is returning a match of $900 million from the federal government. And these projects could be life changers for future generations in Alaska. The Port of Nome, the strategic port there in the Arctic could be a game changer for the state of Alaska. It could bring jobs. It will bring much needed infrastructure all across rural Alaska. And I think these are the type of decisions that we should be agreeing to and voting yes on. So whether this vote passes or fails today, the process will continue. This will not be the final budget that goes into implementation, whether it ends in conference committee or ultimately on the third floor. So I do want Alaskans to know that this budget, regardless of the outcome today, is still a work in progress. And I don't think that it's a perfect bill in any means, but that's the legislative process that we have before us. And I just ask members to keep in mind this is not the final budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm not going to reiterate the points of the previous speakers from Sand Lake or Nikiski that already articulated it so well. I will touch and remind the body of a debate that we had last year where it went on for quite a long time about a resolution about the Port of Alaska or the Port of Anchorage or the Port in Anchorage or the Don Young Port of Alaska, whatever you want to call it. Right now in this budget that we'll have a vote on shortly, there will be a chance to support $100 million for the Port of Alaska. And we've been reiterated multiple times that it is a make or break time for this. I just wanted to remind the body of that. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Majority Leader. Representative Fields.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My brain agrees with the comments from the banker from District 1, and I want to thank him for being so articulate. But my heart is with the little kids who go to Inlet View Elementary, which is the heart of my neighborhood. And in talking about these kids and how the changes in the budget directly affect them, I have to tell you about my grandmother. My grandmother is 94 years old. She grew up so poor she didn't have a chance to see a doctor until she was an adult. Her family were sharecroppers. The wind blew through the gaps in the walls in their house in the winter. And
Representative Field, are you speaking to the changes?
I am speaking directly to the changes. Every single vote I take is for my grandmother, and when I think about the little kids at Inlet View and the changes in this budget, I see my grandmother and those little kids. The changes in the budget before us defund 1 year of public education. A year. Now, there are also some very positive elements in the budget, capital funding for schools and school bond debt reimbursement. But for these little kids, a lot of them have a mom who manages to take them to school and pick them up in between working 2 jobs. For these kids, Inlet View is their chance to pull themselves up into the middle class, just like my grandmother pulled my family up into the middle class. If we fail to vote no on concurrence and defund 1 year of public education funding, we eliminate the early funding for education, and we lock in a $900 million deficit, even if we're lucky enough to have $100 per barrel oil, unfortunately, the reality is we're not going to be able to take care of Inlet View. We're not going to be able to take care of other schools. We're not going to be able to have class sizes small enough so that these kids can climb into the middle class. And for these kids in my neighborhood, Inlet View is their shot. I know the same is true for poor kids across the state. So I guess I just urge a no vote because I actually think we can have it all. We can have the largest dividends the state has ever passed. Those help poor kids at Inlet View too. But we can also have a balanced budget and make sure that we can have reasonable class sizes, make sure that next year we can meet our capital needs to maintain Inlet View and schools throughout the state. There's so much good in this budget. We should keep all that good in the budget, but also make sure it balances. So thank you to the finance team that did amazing work, majority, minority, led by, but not just the co-chairs. Let's vote no on concurrence and have it all when this budget comes back to us in its final form. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Foster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is this wrap up? I assume no other folks are wanting to speak.
I see. Are you speaking, Representative Eastman? I would appreciate it if you wouldn't throw your mic up at the very last second.
No, Madam Speaker, I wish to place a call in the House.
Call's been placed on the House. Brief it is. We will continue while we are placing the call in the House. So Representative Eastman, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, I am grateful that this vote is finally coming to us. I know the budget was passed by the Senate on Tuesday. It's now Saturday. Considering this is the 117th day, that's a lot of time. I wish that it had come here sooner. One of the things that stays the same year after year is not the people. The people change. Members come in and out of this body. I'm sure there are those in the body who've been here a lot longer than I have. And I'm sure soon enough I will give way to someone else. One of the things that does not seem to change, though, is our willingness as a body to pass large, unsustainable budgets. And that's a commitment that I made to my constituents not to continue. What we are looking at today, we're being asked to spend somewhere between $18.5 and $19 billion by my count. And that includes the supplemental portions, that includes the operating portions, that includes the capital portions, that includes the dividend. But even when you take the dividend away and say there was no dividend in this budget, we're still talking $15 billion. And that is a tremendous amount of money. The previous member, had pointed that it's not a balanced budget, and someone else had said, well, yes, it is. Well, if by balanced you mean we can pay for it without going into debt today, yes, it's balanced. If by balanced you mean we are not spending more than we're taking in, it is very unbalanced. Historically, there would have been no need for us to be debating the amount of the dividend today. You see an amount of $5,500 in the Senate budget. You see an amount of $2,550 in the budget that we previously passed. Historically, there would just simply been a line in the budget that said, we're going to follow the law, and that will determine the amount. A member a moment ago mentioned that the dividend is Alaska's relationship with resource development. And historically, that has been the case. But we have turned the dividend into Alaskans' relationship with us. By arguing and debating and trying to decide now what the amount is, rather than waiting till October and letting the market decide and letting our investments decide, as was the design. One of the commitments that I made to my constituents was to follow the law. Allow the law to determine the value of the dividend. And I will continue to fight for that long after this vote, however it goes down. If we had followed the law, Alaskans would each have $9,600 more than they have today. That's how much we have withheld from the dividend over the last 6 years. And even were the $5,500 amount to pass today, that would put only $1,300 of that aside, leaving $8,300 that Alaskans have not had. I can't speak for other districts, but I know in my district, the amount of money withheld from the dividend has been severe in terms of its impact on people. Maybe not on legislators, but on people. As I look at the difference on the dividend alone, let's just talk about that for a moment. The difference between $5,500 and $2,550, if we were to take the midpoint of that, that's just over $4,000. So were we to send this budget to conference committee with a no vote, and they were to simply pick the halfway point between the two PFD amounts, they would end up at roughly a statutory dividend, which is a little more than $4,000. And so I think some of the emphasis on the dividend here in this debate is misplaced, in that it seems unlikely that our conference committee is going to choose the number that we proposed in the House budget, which was the lower amount. It also seems unlikely that the conference committee would choose the higher number. Seems most likely, in my view, is to probably choose something around the middle. What I see in the budget before us is an attempt to spend away our differences as legislators, to spend away the differences that we have representing different parts of our state, representing different priorities. And that strategy is the very reason that we are debating the amount of the dividend today. The only reason we are debating the amount of the dividend today is because previous legislatures have overspent the budget. Previous legislators did exactly what is being asked of us today, to spend more money than we are taking in. How will doing what we have been doing for the last several years, since long before I came into this body, how will this address the problem? How will this not cause future legislatures, long after we're gone, to continue to debate the amount of the dividend, to continue to set aside the law and come up with their own amount? I do not see how continuing what we have done will cause anything better to change. On behalf of my district, I aim to maintain my commitment not to vote for continued unsustainable budgets, to continue to advocate for following the law, and to continue to advocate for working out our differences without resorting simply to spending more money. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Eastman. Representative Foster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't see any questions, and so I did want to stand up and maybe just talk a little bit about where I stand. I'm not going to advocate for folks to vote one way or another. I think that folks should vote their conscience. And again, I just want to state my position on why I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote. These changes are enough for me, as the chair of the operating budget, to do something that is very, very out of the ordinary, and that is to concur and particularly support the full permanent fund dividend. And if we concur, the last time that this occurred was in 1982, and that was 40 years ago, so this is a big deal. But this is so monumental that I am willing to diverge from the norm. Some of the things that I liked about the budgets that are in common, I won't speak to those, but there are things like education, marine highway system. I'm not a real big fan of oil tax credits, but I know some other folks are. Those are good things between the two budgets, but focusing on the differences, other than the PFD on the sheet that I passed out here, there are a lot of things that the other body did that I like. They put more money into education than we did, to the tune of about $3 million. They included funds for increasing residential school stipends by a few $1 million, $4 million. They had VPSO pay at a greater amount than we did, increasing their pay, which has been neglected for many years. With regard to the university, we put a lot of extra money into the university, and the other body put more than we did, and I like that. Focusing on the permanent fund, well, actually, if I could just back up for a second to the capital budget, from my standpoint, when you go to conference committee, nothing can be added into the conference committee. You choose between, what the other body did. You can go all the way down to, usually it's between what the other body did and what we did. You could potentially go all the way down to 0. And so in that situation, I've got the Port of Nome in there. I've got the Port for Amonic. I've got some things that I really like in there. There's no reason for me to want to go to conference if the only thing that we can do is go down from there. There's no upside. It's all downside. And so that's, a risk that I don't necessarily feel comfortable in taking. With regard to the permanent fund dividend, this is a tax. It's a regressive tax on lower income folks. And until the law is changed, as has been mentioned, I support the comments made by other folks. Until it's changed, we should follow the law. if there's any year to have a larger PFD, it is this year. We're seeing high inflation rates. It's going to get worse. It hasn't fully, been factored into the economy at this point. And that extra money in people's pockets can be used for fuel, and that could be whether you're, wanting to go subsistence hunting in a village and you need, gasoline for your boats. That could be for people commuting to work in Anchorage or Matsu. The cost of heating fuel, that's going to skyrocket in our villages as soon as the first barge hits, our hubs. And so folks aren't even feeling that hit yet. Already in a lot of my villages, I'm seeing 2-3 families moving into one house, and that's the case in many communities. We're going to see folks getting their utilities shut off when they can't pay their bills because the cost of diesel, when that first barge hits our villages and our hubs, even with PCE, that cost of electricity is going to go up. People are barely making it as it is right now. And so again, I focus on this PFD and the difference here, and I say that's a regressive tax on lower income folks. If you're making $100,000 a year and you go without $5,000, that's 5% of your income. If you're making $200,000, that's only 2.5% of your income. But a lot of my villages, folks might make $10,000 an entire year. It's a mixed economy between subsistence and a cash economy. But if you're making $10,000 a year and you take $5,000 away from that person, that's 50% of their economy, or they're 50% of their income, I should say. And it's not just low-income folks, but I think there's a lot of middle-income folks that are out there that are also struggling, and they could use this help. So, Madam Speaker, our state coffers, we've seen them swell with revenue because of the high price of fuel, and the state's going to be doing pretty good here over the next few years. And the fall forecast that we receive versus the spring forecast this year, we're seeing an increase to the state coffers to the tune of $2.4 billion. And I think we could share that with folks out there who are trying to get by. So with that, I will be concurring, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I miss anyone? Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House concur in the Senate amendments to committee substitute for House Bill 281 Finance amended. Budget Reserve Fund supermajority failed. Effective date failed. Thus adopting Senate committee substitute for House Bill 281 Finance amended Senate, and recommend that the members allow us to go into conference committee and into the 24-hour rule and vote no.
Are you ready for the question? The question is, shall the House concur in the Senate changes to committee substitute for House Bill 281 Finance amended? Members may proceed to vote. Will the clerk please lock the roll? Does any member wish to change his or her vote? Will the clerk please announce the vote?
18 yeas, 22 nays.
With 18 yeas and 22 nays, the House has failed to concur with House Bill 281, with committee substitute for House Bill 281. In the event the Senate fails to recede from its amendment, I appoint the following members to a conference committee to meet with a like committee from the Senate to consider the bill. I am appointing Representative Kelly Merrick as chair. I am appointing Representative Dan Ortiz, and from the minority, I am appointing Representative Bart Laban. Under Uniform Rule 23, once the Senate names its conferees, in the event they don't recede from their amendments, The 24-hour notification rule is in effect. Brief it is.
So you heard it, my fellow Alaskans. We are all now officially getting the shaft. They have made it so that we will not be seeing a full statutory PFD this year. They did not vote to concur on this budget. It was a vote of 18 to 22 nays, so 18 legislators, in my opinion, voted the correct way. The ones that sold us out that could have been the deciding factor of this going through was Kaufman and let me see, Kirka, Eastman. Man, I am really sad to be seeing this. I mean, Kirka, Eastman, and Kaufman, you guys have all proven, and Kelly Merrick, you guys all guarantee you will not be finding your way back into office again this following year. We are going to make sure that we remove you from office. You have made it perfectly clear that you do not represent Alaskans, and that is really sad to see happening. So they have screwed us all, Alaska. I hope you were paying attention and have shared this video far and wide. If you haven't shared it by now, please do. The arguments given by those who voted no, not concur this budget, every single name that is there, whether I liked you or not prior to this, you are going to be campaigned against this upcoming election season. And good luck keeping your positions in office. Eastman and Kirka, you guys had the support of the Valley, but this vote means that you no longer have our support anymore, and I'll guarantee you that. And we aren't going to let you forget it. Well, we will find other people to replace you. Sumner would have probably been a better choice than you at this point, Eastman. Really sad to say that, but that's kind of the way things are boiling down. I really am disgusted by how many of those down there that the bottom line for them, it isn't the pork spending that they're doing on the special interest that bugs them. It's that they would be following the statutory PFD law for the first time in 7 years. And that is the only thing, the main number one reason why they say they can't pass this budget, that's what made it unsustainable. Let's do a reality check. The only unsustainable part of this entire budget was the illegal funding they are doing for K through 12. That right there never should have been in this budget. That's $1.2 billion that should not have been in this budget, and it would 100% made this a very balanced budget happening right now, especially because they were following the statutory PFD law and not using not one penny of tax revenue to pay our permanent fund dividends for the first time in 7 years. All the other years they have consistently and constantly broken the law and used tax revenue to pay a portion of our permanent fund dividend with. Last year, 100% of our small little portion of our PFDs that we received, all of it was paid using tax money, and they illegally used all of the earnings reserve accounts money to pay for government. And that's exactly what they just agreed to do here. They did not concur the Senate's budget. It's really disgusting to see what just happened there. Oh man, I could go on for hours of how disgusted this makes me right at this moment in time, but I am going to I'm going to leave it right here. I'm done discussing this. The vote will be posted on our page here in just a minute, and I will add a few colorful words there to go along with it. Make sure to share it far and wide about the non-representation that we have going on down there in Juneau, and those legislators that decided that Alaskans do not deserve to receive anything that is statutorily belongs to us, that actually follows our laws that we have. They voted to continue to break our laws, continue to rip off Alaskans, to keep their crony capitalist special interest budgets flowing to them. They gave millions in bonuses and raises to those same special interests this year. There are billions in this budget increasing their budgets. K through 12 saw $3.5 billion sent to them, not the 1.34 that they got last year. No, $3.5 billion got sent to K through 12 inside of this budget, and they are still planning on giving that to them now that it's going into a conference committee. And the people they're putting into this conference committee is Kelly Merrick and LeBron. I did not catch who the third person was, but that tells you everything you need to know. They were the ones that got up there on their podiums and banging on the desk, screaming at us basically all that you Alaskans don't know what you're talking about. You don't deserve that money. You don't know how to spend that money wisely. Only us, the special interests, know how to spend it for you. And that is what they openly declared by their vote here today. Again, please like and share this video. Share it far and wide. The crony capitalist oligarchy, thieving, socialist, radical left, rhino, Republican, Democrat majority sitting there in the Senate or in the House all need to be replaced. And Kirka and Eastman, I'm sad to say you guys have lost my vote this coming up year, and I guarantee you both are on the ballot. You both pretty much represent the district that I'm in right now. And you're on the ballot, Kirka, to become governor after this vote that you just made here today. I don't know of any Alaskan that would ever vote for you. You're just as bad as the ex-Governor Walker that we replaced and put Dunleavy in place of instead. So don't count on my vote for you. And Eastman, I'm really sorry. You've lost my vote also. You told us hands down over and over and over again you would vote yes for a budget that had the statutory PFD in it. And here you are. You broke our promise, the promise you made to us, your constituents, for your vote today. Same as everybody else that's inside of that room that made promises to follow the law. Clearly, following the law does not mean a dang thing to you when it comes to benefiting all Alaskans, only when it benefits your crony special interests or for your moral values about funding that was put back in that you dang well know that our court systems would strip right back out and put back in. And you know what I mean by that, that you would strip it out, they would put it right back in year after year. That happens. And Eastman and Kirka's votes, I'll put you bottom dollar on it. Kirka made it very clear that's why he was voting no. And David Eastman sidestepped around that. He didn't want to admit that was the reason why he was voting no. He gave claims of the unsustainable budget, which he himself knows is an outright lie. I have seen the publications that he has been putting out here the last few days to try to justify his no vote. And they all fell on empty ears, and they were hollow reasons, just like the same ones that were advocating to not concur this budget here today. You guys, I'm just sickened. Thank you all for being here today. Please like and share this video. You can find this video when it's live on politidic.com. We have set up a link on there. If you go to our homepage at politidic.com, you will see a post there that says Politidic Live. Click on that link, and if we are live, you will find us live on the website. We are also found on Twitter and YouTube and here on Facebook. And I always say here on Facebook because Facebook is my main streaming platform, no matter where I am streaming to, at Politidic. So if you just type in our name into Google, you will bring up our Twitter, our YouTube, our website, everything all in one place. We will be ranked in the top 10 every single time for all your latest updates that mainstream media and these corrupt legislators, assembly members, council members, and all of the above down the line want to keep hidden from you. That is basically what we're here for and what we are doing in making sure that we document this stuff and stream it uncut and live to all of you. This Monday, I will be live streaming one from the School of Government, and it will be discussing ranked choice voting. And so I hope you guys can all tune in. This is going to affect us for our up and coming election. We all need to be educated on the process that's going to be happening. Not to mention the 48 names that are on the special ballot right now to replace Congressman Don Young. Out of those 48 names, only 45 of them are still in the race. 3 of them have dropped out, but it was too late to remove their names off the ballot. So in reality, there's only 45 people to vote for, and unless you go directly to the election site and go look at the candidates that are running, you would never know that by the ballot that you have received in the mail. So be very aware, educate yourself before you cast that vote on the ballot. Again, like and share this video, and do one last thing for me. It would be greatly appreciated if you could. Please go to our website, politidic.com, and help us grow. Your proceeds make it all possible to be live streaming to all of these social media channels at the exact same time. Without your support, we would be stuck on Facebook only. You would not be able to find us at politidic.com, Twitter, YouTube, and also one other place is Politidic Unfiltered on Facebook. Please like Politidic Unfiltered. When we do a restream like this one, it will always be found there. And unlike our Politidic page that we have, they are not shadow banning that page yet, so you will always get a notification when we go live. But here at Politidic, we just received another violation for the State of the Union address given by Joe Brandon. This is the 3rd time they have flagged this video for copyrights. First time it was Warner Brothers, then it was Disney, and now they're doing another one for some foreign looking news company that they said I streamed this from, and I'm violating their copyright, and they put over 30 minutes of the video and says that it belongs to somebody else. It's an outright lie. I streamed that directly from Fox News, yet that's the only company they say I don't have a copyright against. They keep naming all of these far left extremist multinational media companies as where I'm getting the feed from, and I have openly pointed out to them that's an outright lie, and your support goes right into helping us combat that. We would love to be able to start live streaming to Rumble, and just like being able to restream right now costs money every single year to be able to have these services. To get us on Rumble is another monthly subscription that will have to be paid for to be able to cover that, and without your support I just can't personally afford to be able to do that. Whether it's $5, $10, $20, $50, $100, $200, all proceeds go right into helping us. Or get yourself a monthly subscription for $5 a month. Every penny keeps going right back into what we're doing. Keep upgrading our cameras, microphones, our ability to get out onto more streaming platforms. It's your support that is making that happen. Thank you all for tuning in here today, and please, once again, like and share.